And with me now is a Democrat representing District 49, Congressman Mike Levin. Congressman, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Alex. Good to be with you.
For starters, impeachment. Is it still on the table for you?
Well, I think getting to the truth is what's on the table and allowing the facts to take us wherever they may lead. You know, I took a oath of office on January 3rd, along with Republicans and Democrats, to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, not to protect and defend the president, not to protect and defend a political party either. And what I'm going to do is focus on my constitutional obligation to get to the truth. You know, the rule of law needs to apply to everyone in this country, including the President of the United States. There were things in the Mueller report that were quite concerning to me, particularly the 10 instances where the president actively tried to impede the investigation. I was also quite concerned the president wouldn't testify under oath to Mr. Mueller. So we're going to do what we can in our committees of jurisdiction to get to the facts, get the evidence out there, make sure that Attorney General Barr testifies, make sure that Mr. Mueller testifies so we fully understand why he wouldn't reach a traditional prosecutorial judgment, and also those sources of information from the administration that Mr. Mueller relied upon. We need to hear from them. Just as importantly, Alex, there were a lot of things that weren't in the Mueller report, specifically the president's potential financial entanglements with Deutsche Bank and Russia. We need to get to the bottom of why the president won't release any of his tax returns. And I think it's very important that we try to keep politics out as much as possible. And I want to make sure that we are as thoughtful and as deliberative in this process as the president is sometimes impulsive when he governs by tweet or when he makes snap judgments. We can't afford snap judgments. It's just too important for the country.
Well, you bring up the politics of this, but I mean, I can't help but look at this and see this impeachment talk making its way into 2020. How big of a role do you think it's going to play?
Well, I think voters are smart enough to look at the entirety of the issues before us and how this president's policies have either hurt or helped. I think in California there's a great deal of harm that this administration has had in terms of everything from tax policy to environmental policy, and I think that those will ultimately be the more important issues to voters. That being said, I have a constitutional duty, as do all 435 members of the House, to fully investigate and to make sure that the rule of law applies to everyone, including the President of the United States.
I want to talk about H.R. 1 that passed last month. It calls for a strategy to protect democratic institutions. But isn't this an opportunity to potentially go further? Here we have concrete evidence of meddling from a foreign government into our elections. Both sides of the aisle right now are saying that they're against it. And 2020 is right around the corner. I mean, isn't this a chance for a Democratic Congress to step up and enact some teeth, some strong legislation that says, hey, we're looking and we're taking election meddling seriously?
Well, H.R. 1 actually does that. That's the interesting thing here, Alex, is that we passed a bill as our top priority in the new House of Representatives to try to get foreign interference out of our elections. That's a key component in H.R. 1, along with protecting the right to vote, living up to the promise of the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, and also trying to get the dark money out of our political system. And if the Republicans, particularly Mitch McConnell, if they were serious about really wanting to prevent foreign interference in the 2020 election and in future elections, they would take a long look at those parts of H.R. 1, and they would at least consider those in the Senate. And I hope that that's what they do, and I'll be watching. The American people will be watching.
But you think H.R. 1 will suffice? You want to go further?
I think there are parts of H.R. 1 that directly deal with foreign interference in our elections. I am supportive of any and all measures to try to prevent the type of foreign interference that we saw from Russia in the 2016 election. We know that there were other people trying to interfere with the 2018 election. We've done very little to dissuade those who would do the same in the 2020 election. In fact, I think they've only been encouraged by many of the actions of this president, this administration.
Okay, I want to bring things a little bit closer to home. So you've been working on federal funds to expedite removal of spent nuclear fuel at San Onofre. Tell me about that a little bit.
Well, we have a plant, the San Onofre Nuclear Generating Station, right in the middle of the 49th Congressional District, and we need to get the waste that's been there for far too long off the coast. There are two things that are very unique about San Onofre as a site for spent nuclear fuel. One of them is the population density. We have 8.3 million people within a 50-mile radius of the San Onofre site. The second is seismic risk. There are 2 active earthquake faults and a whole network of inactive earthquake faults, meaning that that site is more risky than virtually anywhere else in the country from the perspective of spent nuclear fuel storage. And so I am going to be introducing legislation when I get back to Washington where we would prioritize sites that have a greater environmental risk and a greater population density as we consider the movement of spent nuclear fuel. I've also called for appropriations of $25 million so that we can do a deeper dive on consolidated interim storage. Secretary of Energy Rick Perry has expressed a desire to see spent nuclear fuel move to Texas. That would obviously require a lot of planning, both transportation planning and then the siting and permitting and licensing of a interim repository. I want to see as soon as possible and as safely as possible the waste off our coast. I think it's critically important when you consider there are 1,600 tons of highly radioactive waste sitting right by the ocean. We cannot allow that to be there for much longer. And the earliest estimates from Southern California Edison is that we would begin moving that waste in 2035. We wouldn't end moving it until 2050. Right. Yeah. I'd like to accelerate that by 10 or 15 years. It's going to take a coordinated federal, local, and state effort. I have a task force as well, run by the former head of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and by a Navy admiral who knows a thing or two about moving nuclear material around. And we're going to get to the bottom of this, and we're going to do everything we can to get that waste off the coast.
Congressman, the time passes fast. We're going to have you come back, and we'll talk about some more, but I appreciate you stopping by.
Always happy to do it. Thanks, Alex.
Definitely.